So Biden's debt ceiling deal, we just went over the specifics of it. You could check out that segment if you'd like to hear it. For those of you listening to the show, in the audio podcast version, you just heard it. So we basically have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all protected. And then you have what is effectively like a 2% cut for non-defense social safety net programs, with the exception of the SNAP program, which is the food stamp program, because it looks like there may have actually been a little bit of an expansion because they got rid of all the rules for homeless people and for veterans when it comes to those programs. So I don't think there's any denying that Biden got more than anybody really expected him to get in this negotiation from Kevin McCarthy. I mean, I saw speculation that we would have 10%, 12%, 15% cuts across the board for our social safety net, including things like Medicaid, including the food stamp program, etc. That's not what we ended up getting. So on paper, it's like, okay, not a bad deal. But the problem is you don't even need a deal because Biden has the authority to get around this entire problem and just say, 14th Amendment says the U.S. debt should never be questioned. And there's a contradiction in federal law here, right? Constitution says one thing, that's the supreme law of the land. And then there's, other parts of the law that the debt limit, in particular, the debt ceiling is like, you can't go over this amount in debt. And so that you could just fall on Biden. I'm going to decide to interpret it in this direction. In other words, the debt ceiling is unconstitutional. We're just going to ignore this. There's no more debt ceiling. He could do that. He chose not to do that. So you have some progressive Democrats who are honestly upset at the way Biden has approached this whole thing. So in step Jamaal Bowman. Now, what's interesting here is you're going to hear something from Jamaal Bowman. Then you're also going to hear something from not a progressive Democrat, from a much more corporate Democrat, as to how they view this whole situation and how it unfolded. Listen.
Negotiations between the House Republican leaders and the White House are still happening at this hour. They still need to get a deal. They still need to sell it to the broader House and Senate conferences and caucuses on each side of the aisle and get that through the parliamentary process, which can take many days, and get that all done potentially as soon as June 1st to avoid that debt default. But getting it done by then seems very unlikely at this point. This comes all as we're hearing mounting frustration from a number of members, particularly Democrats, who have been shut out of these negotiations on Capitol Hill and are concerned that the White House is giving up too much to the House GOP.
I'm very frustrated. I called on the president to invoke the 14th Amendment and mint a coin and do not negotiate with hostage takers. I mean, we don't negotiate with terrorists globally. Why are we going to negotiate with the economic terrorists here that are the Republican Party?
Economic terrorists that are the Republican Party. Listen, he's not wrong, right? He's not wrong. Because again, to explain the way this works, the debt ceiling is basically like you go to a restaurant to get some food. You order a whole bunch of stuff, bunch of appetizers, the most expensive dish they have. The bill comes back, it's, let's say, $200. And then when the bill comes, you go, oh, I'm not paying that much. I have a limit of $80 that I can spend, and this bill says $200. I'm not paying for that. Well, what's the problem here? The problem is, if you only have $80, don't spend $200. So the negotiation and the debate around the spending levels happens during the budget process. You can't do one thing during the budget process and then turn around and go, I'm now demanding cuts to this, this, and this, and we're not going to pay on the stuff we already laid out we're supposed to pay for. So when he calls them economic terrorists, he's not wrong. I mean, it's strong language, but he's not wrong. And he's right in prodding Biden, say, hey, 14th Amendment or mint the coin. If you did one of those things, we wouldn't even be having a discussion where there's any cuts on the table to any of these programs. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Now, again, my guess is if, when this deal gets to the House and gets to the Senate, you're going to have between 0 and 10 Democratic holdouts, which is next to nothing or basically nothing. It'll be interesting to see how Jamaal Bowman votes. He's talking a strong game here, but will he buckle when push comes to shove? Well, normally the progressive Democrats do. They'll go in line with Democratic leadership, right? Oh, you have to do this. This is the best deal we could get. Biden's not going to do the 14th Amendment, and they'll fold and they'll do it, right? But we'll see. We'll see. So 0 to 10 holdouts on the Democratic side. My guess is there's going to be way, way, way more on the Republican side. But now, here's a corporate Democrat telling you what he regrets.
The greatest regret that we should have was the failure to raise the debt ceiling limit back in December, when the Democrats were in control of both chambers of Congress. So that is a miscalculation that we will live to regret.
You know, the Speaker has decided to make this really a public relations effort and really turning it into a political process.
So what Representative Richie Torres said there is, look, we had control, man. We had control. We had control of the House. We had control of the Senate. Biden was president. And you know what? A guy by the name of Bernard Sanders came out and said, hey, let's address this debt ceiling thing now. Let's get rid of it now or raise it now. Because if we don't, we all know the Republicans are going to try to take hostages when the time comes. And that's exactly what happened. And now, in retrospect, as is almost always the case, these people are like, oh, turns out Bernie was correct. Yeah, you don't say. You don't say. So look, I mean, I think the takeaways are pretty obvious here. The takeaways are Joe Biden, in these negotiations with Republicans, got more than anybody expected he would get. People were thinking a 10%, 12%, or 15% cut across the board for all of the non-defense spending. The Republicans didn't get that. They got like a 2% cut, and it was only to some of those things. So, objectively speaking, he did better than almost anybody thought he would do. However, the whole conversation is dumb. The whole conversation is a moot point because we didn't have to engage in this pageantry, in this kabuki theater, in this fake negotiation. And here you have Democrats who are kind of realizing that. But again, we'll see if they're just talking the talk or if they'll walk the walk also. Because when this comes for a vote, how many Democratic holdouts will there be? That's the question. How many Democratic holdouts? And I got to tell you guys, based on history, I don't think it'll be that many, if any, at all. But you will have a lot of Republicans up in arms because they want a hell of a lot more, and they're all going 100 miles an hour against this deal right now. So we'll see how it unfolds. But suffice to say, the commentary from Jamaal Bowman here, I think, is pretty accurate. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.